to 2025. My name is Tammy, and this is the Protagonist Pub. And this is going to be my first bi-weekly wrap-up. And after this one, the format is going to change a little bit, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. And you'll understand why as this video progresses. I have read by the way, it's the 13th of January. This is probably coming out on the 15th. So don't anticipate, as of this filming, finishing anything between now and the 15th. If I do, I will just talk about it at the end of the month. I have gotten a tremendous amount of reading done this month. However, it does not look like it on paper. It does not look like it on, the blog where I do the written reviews, because so much of what I have read has been episodic reading. And because of that episodic reading, it's part of the reason why I'm going to change the format of these updates going forward. And it will make much more sense then. So, let's talk about the episodic reading first versus what I have completed. And I have my reading journal, and I have a lot of books in progress at various stages of progress, and books I have yet to start. And yeah, I knew going in my January pile was staggering. I didn't fully comprehend how much pressure I was applying to myself, but I did it to myself, so here you go. Okay, so let's start with Sherlock Holmes. This is a Dave 25 and 25 book, and I read The Sign of Four. And again, it's a Sherlock story that was incredibly familiar to me. I did review this one independently on my blog because it was long enough that it made sense to do that. A lot of the other stories in the Sherlock book do not lend themselves to an independent review. But The Sign of Four is, one of those that does lend itself to that. And I'm going to be honest, it is not my favorite Sherlock Holmes story ever. I find it convoluted. I found the ending to be the resolution to be a little convenient. And I think part of that is because I know the story so well, and I've seen it, depicted on, in movie format, old time radio. There are so many, variations of The Sign of Four that it is one of those overly familiar stories, and that undoubtedly played into it. I enjoyed it, yes. Is it by far my favorite Sherlock Holmes story? No. No, it is not. But I did meet the Sherlock goal for this month, so I'm good with that. And I did start Sarum by Edward Rutherford. It is, there are a couple of tabs in here. And the first chapter was not that long. It was 39 pages. But it is 39 pages of, I don't know if you can see this, dense text, and it was thoroughly enjoyable. It's prehistory. It sets up the family structures that the rest of the novel will follow. It sets up the tension between those families. And it introduces you to ancient Britain. The separation, it occurs in the book, of Britain from continental Europe occurs. Aurochs are in the story, which if you don't know, I will try and remember to leave a link to what an auroch is in the description box down below. And it was just a fascinating glimpse. And I have one more chapter to read this month in this book, and it is, 28 pages. So it isn't a great time investment, page count wise, but, it's going to take me longer to read 28 pages in this book than, let's say, a mass market paperback. But thoroughly enjoying it. My commentary is on Discord, and we'll keep that up throughout the year. And his storytelling is just tremendous. Okay, so what else have I read episodically? Next up would be the complete stories of Flannery O'Connor. I have read the first 3 stories in here. They are all short. This is a Catholic classic. And in those first 3 stories, I will tell you there is no faith whatsoever. And if you are easily offended by language, depiction, tone from writers in our not so distant past, then do not pick up Flannery O'Connor. I'm just going to put that out there. However, if you allow yourself the grace to read her as a voice of her time, she will transport you in a very short story to a time and place. And you meet those characters as they would have existed at that time, with all of the societal norms that are so heavily objected to today. However, they were the norm then. And if you can't read her with a modern mindset and choose to be offended, because if you do that, you will be offended at every single point in this compendium of short stories. There is not a point at which I can imagine not being offended if you are easily offended by anything. I didn't know what to expect going in, and now that I know what to expect, I'm looking forward to the next set of stories in February. They aren't long reads, they aren't difficult reads, but they are very much a challenge to the modern reader to accept them for what and where they were written. And I'm excited. So, next up would be another classic Catholic fiction. I have read so far the first 4 stories in the Father Brown compendium, and they are under the subheading of The Innocence of Father Brown. I'm trying to read the entire Innocence of Father Brown in January. And I think I have 8 left to go. Yep, I have 8 stories left to go. So it's roughly 3 a week between now and the end of the month. Hopefully I get them done before that. And these are very different than if you have watched the BBC series, which, by the way, I highly recommend. They're very short. On average, these stories are between 8 and 10 pages long. There is not a lot of detail. The language is sparse in detail while being incredibly precise in what it is conveying. And these are theological stories. There is no other way to describe them. So Father Brown is our titular protagonist, and he is described as a short, bumbling, nondescript priest as the first story opens up, and easily overlooked. And what you get in each of these stories is a quiet priest that doesn't overlook the little details in life and is very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Astute in his observations of his fellow man. And if you've watched the series, you will recognize the villain of Flambeau, and you meet him in 2 of the first 4 stories I have read. Flambeau was an absolute, star of those stories. And in each time, Father Brown not only solves the mystery involved, and so far, no, he solved the mystery, and he gets Flambeau to change his behavior with a theological argument. And it isn't a theological argument that cites chapter and verse. It's a theological argument from the heart, and they're fantastic. And they're, short pick-me-ups with, for me, a very familiar character. But, the character of Father Brown on the BBC is a much more modern version, although I still picture him in my head when I'm reading the actual character that Chesterton wrote. And as these stories open up, they take place in London. Not, out in the country. He's not a bumbling parish priest. He's very much a priest in London. And they're fantastic. And I look forward every time I open up to read one. They're just joyful. And I can't imagine going back and reading them later when I just need a reminder that life isn't all bad. So, okay. That, I believe, as I peruse my shelves over there that are a mess, which is why I'm not filming over there, is everything I have currently read that's episodic in nature. I am behind on Dante, like wickedly behind on Dante. Probably going to just start over and do it that way. Not this month. So, up next, let's do what I have read since I last did a weekly update. And these are not going to be in order, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room first. So as you know, in the 25 and 2025 video, which I will link down below, Dave chose the Stormlight Archive for me books, 2 through 5, since he chose book 1 and I substituted out because I already finished it. And Wind and Truth, which is book 5, released at the beginning of December. I had pre-ordered it months and months ago, and I was excited. So I picked up Words of Radiance, which is book 2, and started reading. I was ignoring all the reviews for Wind and Truth. I didn't want to be spoiled. I had no reason to doubt that, it would continue in quality. So I was, annotating as I went. I don't know if you can see that. And then the lovely Amanda sent me a video link and said, you might want to watch this. I'm glad she sent it, but I'm also not glad I watched it. I've watched several since. The link, while not containing spoilers for the story contained in Wind and Truth, which finishes up the first arc of the Stormlight Archive, spills a lot of beans in the fact that for the first time, Sanderson has not only bent his knee to the woke nonsense, he has infested book 5 with it, and now I just want to get to book 5 so that I can read for myself, judge for myself how bad it is, and so that's not hanging over my head for the rest of the year. So, Words of Radiance is a reread for me, as is Oathbringer, which is book 3. And Words of Radiance was very familiar as I was reading it. I knew what was coming as I was carefully rereading it and annotating it, and there was very little surprise. Then I watched the videos, and I switched from a very careful, detailed rereading and annotation, and I checked out the audiobook from the library, and I did my first ever listen to an audiobook on 2x speed. I know, shocking. I normally just listen at regular speed, but no, this one I needed to listen at double the speed. It was still an incredibly enjoyable story. It is still incredibly intricate and detailed and, fascinating characters with great, intense character development. But unfortunately, there is this underlying, I don't want to say fear, unease about what is coming in book 5 that is tainting my rereading of book 2. It will, persist through 3, and book 4 is a brand new read for me. And it is very frustrating how, an author just decides to, light the bridge on fire for his fan base and do it knowingly and willingly and taint all of his previous works. I have no better way to describe it than they all feel tainted right now. So I did enjoy this book. It's still a very beautiful cover. It's still a very beautifully told story. It's just the unease of what is contained in book 5. I don't know how else to describe it. So, as I drop it, stay tuned for Oathbringer. Let's see if I can at least start it this month. And, we'll see. So, what else did I read? Okay, so let's talk about what I finished in December. I had to go grab my calendar. So, at the end of December, I finished, I think, 2 books. Yeah, I finished 2 books at the end of December, amidst all the joy and, celebration that is the week of Christmas. First up would be, one was Kindle Unlimited, one was a library book. Library book has been returned. Library book was Death on Brittany Shores by Jean-Luc Banalac, and this is the second book in the Commissaire Dupin series, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic, and it takes place on several of the islands off the coast of Brittany, they're fairly far off the coast of Brittany, and 3 bodies wash ashore. It's quickly determined that they are the victims of foul play, and the book almost entirely takes place on these isolated islands in winter. It was just a atmospheric read. It takes place over the course of 3 days, and you are, as a reader, transported to these islands. The environmental imagery in these books is fantastic. Every time I read one, okay, I've read 2, but I'm sure it holds true for the rest of the series. The environment is absolutely a character in the book. The setting, just it is an absolute character, and it was fascinating. It was a very much an intellectual show me, don't tell me mystery, and it was fascinating. I love these books. They are slower reads. They're police procedurals, and they're not English common law police procedurals. They're very much based on the French legal system, which is unlike our own, unless you live in Louisiana. And they're just fascinating glimpses into France, and I am definitely continuing this series. And I believe on Storygraph, I think I gave it like a 3.75. So it's a very high Cicero rating for me. It may have even gotten a Murakami rating because, no one talks about these books. No one talks about the fact that a book set off in France is written by a German author, translated into French, is a bestseller in France, and then translated into English for the English-speaking audience. And they're just fantastic. They are fantastic. They are just, yeah, I'm glad my library has them. I am looking forward to them. So, the next book I read was on Kindle Unlimited. That was Spies Don't Fall for Their Asset by Meg Easton. She was a new to me author earlier in December when I read her short story. Put a picture of the short story right here. And it was related to this book. I enjoyed this book. I will tell you right up front, I gave it a 2-star Chesterton rating because, what? It's not bad. It's perfectly enjoyable. It is very long, and it is very unrealistic. I'm just going to say it. It is very unrealistic. I don't remember the name of the protagonist, but essentially we have our female protagonist who is a physical therapist, and I don't even remember how the story kicks off, but she is mistaken for a spy asset, and our male protagonist is obviously a spy for an unnamed 3-letter agency that doesn't exist in real life but exists in books. And he decides to protect her by dating her, and it kicks off from there. So the romance was cute, but it was too insta-love for me. And this is the first in a series, by the way. I don't want to say it was disjointed, because it was the story thread itself was not disjointed. However, it was disjointed for me because it felt so incredibly fake that it was borderline uncomfortable to read. And not because of the content. Content was fine. It was, perfectly clean. It was perfectly acceptable content. The romance was sweet. There was no objectionable content. It was just disjointed because I couldn't fall in love with anything that was going on in the series, in the book. It's well written. That isn't the problem. It wasn't believable for me at all. And I am not going to continue the series. So, okay. So what next did I read? Well, at the end of December, I did start The Woman in the Library by Sulari Gentile. I did finish it in the beginning of the new year. And in fact, I finished it on the 1st. This was a library book. It is a standalone mystery. And I want to read more from her because this book was absolutely fabulous. It is a contemporary contemporary mystery. And the premise is these 4 people are sitting at a reading table in the Boston Public Library reading room. They hear a woman scream, and the mystery builds from there. And as the mystery itself unfolds, you learn all kinds of things. And by the way, this is an epistolary novel. It is not told fully in epistolary, but it's not clear if it's a physical letter or an email. I'm guessing it's an email, given it's contemporary, at the end of every chapter. And it opens up with one of those emails. And in the email, which is perfectly innocuous as the book opens up, I was instantly like, whoa, this dude is creepy. And so the premise is that there is the 2 people corresponding. One is an aspiring, as yet unpublished author, and the other is a very successful published author who is living in Australia. and they're corresponding, and as they correspond, the novel the published author is writing is unfolding in the pages of the book. So you're reading her unpublished work. And it really is the tale of two interwoven things: what's happening in the unpublished story and what's happening in the letters as it relates to the story. And the story is tightly woven with characters that are relatable and believable, and you get red herrings and little clues along the way that are very subtly written. And then you get the letters, the emails at the end of every chapter, which are running commentary on how the story is unfolding. Now, the book was published, I want to say 21 or 22. I don't have it in front of me. I'll put the year right here. And there is mention of COVID and masking and distancing and all that stuff. However, you know how I feel about mention of real world in my fiction books? In this case, it was done perfectly. I cannot stress this enough. It is the first and to date only time it has been so well done that it did not bother me in the slightest. That is saying something for me. I absolutely loved this book. It is not long. It's 250 pages. It is tightly written. It is standalone, so you can read it and you are done. And it was absolutely fabulous. I loved it. It was creepy. It was atmospheric. It was a show me, not tell me. It was everything I wanted in a mystery, and it was just great. Okay, next up is Volume 1 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. This is an epistolary. It's told completely in journal format. It is the first installment of the Emma M. Lyon read-along for Jen over at Jen's Reading Life. I'll link her announcement video down below. And this was my first work by this author. This is very short. They are all available on Kindle Unlimited. It is a little over 100 pages, and some of those pages are a one-word sentence. I gave this a 2. This was a solid Chesterton for me. I wanted more. You get to know the character of Emma through her journals, and you get to know where she's living in London, which is the fictional neighborhood of St. Crispian's. It is set in an alternative universe of Victorian England. There's a little bit of magical realism. There's a little, they're very hard to describe. I am the outlier here. Everybody else loves these. I was left wanting more, which obviously is the point of, slim volumes. But I am still undecided if I am curious enough to pick up volume 2, or did I read enough to satisfy the urge? I still don't know the answer to that question. She has a beautiful Instagram account. Her reels are fantastic, and the reels her fans make are fantastic, but this just, I wanted more backstory, and I wanted more, of her daily life, and yeah, it left me unfulfilled and unsatisfied with where things were going, and that is unfortunate, unfortunately. Okay, so I've only finished one more book. Let me grab it here. I haven't yet returned it to the library. And if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I put a post up and I said this is the most, what did I say? Least compelling cover in recent memory. I have since changed my mind entirely, and the cover is completely appropriate for this book. That is Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. This was a recommendation from Miriam, and I will link Miriam's channel down below. This is the first book in the Maisie Dobbs series, and it is a mystery, and it is by far, it was such a different read. I'm not going to categorize this as a cozy because it is clearly not a cozy. It is just a mystery. It isn't really any of the subgenres. And it's fantastic. Maisie is a very complex, engaging character that you cannot get enough of. And this opening book was the very, there's a very big portion in the center that is her backstory. And you couldn't stop reading it because she is such a unique character. And I don't want to say too much here because it would spoil your picking it up and reading it. She is thoughtful. She is intelligent. She is not an amateur sleuth. She uses her brain and uses it effectively. Okay, so where was I before the bird interrupted? Oh yeah, Maisie. She is this very thoughtful, complex, well-rounded, thinking character that you cannot help but A, feel compassion for, and B, you can't wait for her to solve the mystery that's going on because you know she's going to do it in a very unique way. And I loved every moment of it. It was fantastic. So thank you, Miriam. It is a series I will be continuing. And I was blown away. And I am counting it as the 2003 book for Read My Life. Which, hey, I didn't expect that. It wasn't one of the choices I found ahead of time, but I am all for it. So, if you haven't yet, pick up Maisie Dobbs. Okay. So, what am I in the process of reading, you might wonder? And the answer to that is, it is so varied and so different and so scattered. It's mind-blowing. So, let's do them in the order of closest to being finished. And as I sort them, okay. First up is the most heavily tabbed book I think I have sitting on my shelves, and the most unique I think I have ever read. And it is part of one of the two choices for the Jane Austen birthday celebration hosted by Anne. I will link her announcement video down below. That is Pamela by Samuel Richardson. And there's just some of my tabs. I am, I think, officially halfway through. I'm on page 300, and my version without the annotations is 502 pages. 503. So I am more than halfway through. And it is entirely epistolary. It is disputed, argued about as being the first ever novel. And the Discord chat over on Anne's Discord server has been fantastic for this. I have many, many thoughts. I'm not going to talk about the thoughts here. I may or may not end up doing a video just for Pamela, because it is, there's so much to talk about. The unacknowledged, as you listen to Fireball grumble, and there is no question, even though it is not mentioned specifically by Austen, that she read this. It's just, I can't see an argument that, not nonsense that says she did not. It is an interesting read. I'm just going to leave it there. It is an interesting read. Which, as I said on Discord, an understatement that echoes down the centuries. If you are a reader of classics and you love the novel format, you need to read this book. I'm not going to tell you it's an easy read but you need to read it. Okay, so what else am I reading? That's the furthest along. I am, on my copy of the book, I'm exactly halfway through Persuasion by Jane Austen. And chapter-wise, I'm a little over halfway through. This is the group read for Jen's January event. I do not remember reading Persuasion in high school. It's entirely possible that I did. I have absolutely no recollection of it. And this is by far the most introspective of Austen's novels. Our heroine is Anne Elliot, and she is the most wallflower, neglected, retiring of Austen's heroines. She very much fades into the background of everything that's going on around her. She is not, she's the character that will not attend a party so that she can stay home and take care of her sister's kids. Or she's the one playing, music so that everyone else can dance and socialize. And I'm going to have many thoughts, but I'm going to save those thoughts until I've finished. And they're in my wrap-up video. Because this is my book, this is our book club selection for January. So I'm doing a separate video for Austen. And yeah, Persuasion definitely deserves it because she is so very, very different than Austen's other heroines. So I'm very glad we chose it. I am also reading because apparently I thought I didn't have enough on my, list. I thought I would add 2 library books, one of which I've finished. I added Anne of Green Gables. This is a library copy. I have ordered myself a copy, and I'm gonna, because I can't buy the box set for the covers I like, I'm buying them individually. And that should be here next week. I am a third of the way through. I'm reading it in the evenings as we, go to bed. It's a reread for me. I read it, decades ago. I don't remember it in great detail. I do know that it is going to be my choice for Amanda's Southern Comfort Readathon because it is about a character coming home. I think she fits that description quite perfectly. Okay, so those are the books I am furthest along in. So what else am I currently in process of reading? So one of them is Evelina by Frances Burney. I read the first 15, 20 pages on the 1st of January. And this is for Epistolary January. I've wanted to read it. It is a completely epistolary novel. I did not anticipate Pamela taking me so long. I thought I would, be through them both by this point. And I'm doing so much talking on Discord for Pamela and, annotating and writing notes to myself in the text of Pamela that it's taking me longer. However, Evelina, I think, will be a much quicker read. And I'm looking forward to it. The first, 15, 20 pages that I read were completely fantastic. And I picked this one back up last night. I started this one too on January 1st, and it is Catholic fiction. That is Miss Shelf Magic by S.R. Crickland. This is for Jeanette's Christian Fiction Reading Challenge for 2025, which I will link down below. And this is Catholic fantasy. And despite everything else I'm reading and enjoying and absolutely loving and, losing myself in, if you said, hey, Tammy, what book do you want to, just sit down and pick up? It would be this one. It would absolutely be this one. A, I love the cover. B, I love the fact that it's set in a library and it's going to be a romance, and it is just, I'm not very far. I'm currently on page 32 out of 300, and she's a new to me author, and I am in love. I fully anticipate finishing this book this week. I want to read it. Like, it keeps calling to me, and I keep having to be sidetracked by other things so that I can make progress and check things off and move things along. But I anticipate this week, having more completions so that I can start other things. I know that Amanda and I are starting our buddy read of, I didn't pick it up, it's over on the shelf, Shadow in the White City by Jocelyn Green, which is the second book in the Windy City Saga series. I have, the rest of my January staggering pile to read. I am not lacking in things to read. So it has been an interesting month so far. I am very glad I decided to do away with weekly updates because the pressure there would have been tremendous. So okay, so how is content changing moving forward? This is inspired by Anne's latest weekly update video, and it's just, rather than trying to remember my impressions of what I read at the middle of the month and then at the end of the month, I'm just going to start doing vlog style updates as I read. So as I finish a book or as I finish a set of episodic reads, it will be easier for me to A, remember what I've read, and B, I can group them all together and you can have a continuous thought process. Now, I will say that for Pamela, I'm probably not going to do a lot of updating because, well, that would just be an entire vlog for the second, half of Pamela. And, well, that would make no sense without the first half. So I will just keep that update for the end of the book. However, for everything else, I will update along the way. And I think that will be helpful for me moving forward. It will give you a better sense of how things are going throughout the, in the update intervals. So that is the change. We'll see how it works. As always, things are subject to change around here. Okay. That pretty much sums up the first, we'll call it the first 12 days of January 2025. It has been highly productive without a lot to show for it. And writing has gone well. I'm up to date with the in the year reading for, the Rosary, the Catechism, the Bible. I am right on track with that. Everything so far is going well. It just, when I sit down to do this, it doesn't look like a lot because there's only 4 books finished. And I believe, 5 books finished and 2 of those were in December. I'm okay with that. I really, really am. I'm really okay with that. So, have you guys had a, good start to January? Are you making progress on your goals? Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.